All right, let's dive right into the incredible world of forensic biology. We're talking about a science where the tiniest, most overlooked clues, think a single drop of blood, a strand of hair, maybe even just a bit of pollen, can totally crack a case wide open. These clues are what we call silent witnesses, and believe me, they have a lot to say.
You know, at the very heart of all of this is one simple but powerful idea. Every contact leaves a trace. And that's not just some cool-sounding phrase from a crime show. It's the bedrock principle for investigators. It's how they build their cases. Those tiny traces, those are the silent witnesses we're going to be exploring.
So, what is forensic biology, really? When you boil it all down, it's pretty straightforward. It's using the science of life, biology, to help solve legal questions. It's this entire field dedicated to looking at biological evidence to do things like, identify a suspect, find someone who's missing, or just piece together what actually happened at a crime scene. And the reason we call it a silent witness is actually pretty profound. Think about it. This kind of evidence can't be threatened, it can't be bribed, and its memory, it never, ever fades. It gives this completely objective voice to an investigation, and sometimes it's the only thing that can speak for a victim.
Now, when you think about forensic biology, I bet one thing pops into your head almost immediately, right? DNA. And for good reason. It has absolutely transformed this field. People call it the golden standard because, well, it's become the ultimate piece of biological evidence.
I mean, its power is just undeniable. A DNA profile that comes from blood or saliva, or even just a few skin cells can link a person to a crime scene, or just as importantly, prove they weren't there, with a level of accuracy that was basically science fiction just a few decades back. It really is the closest thing we have to a perfect biological fingerprint.
But this technology didn't just pop up overnight. It's been a long journey. If you look at this timeline, you can see it all started way back in 1901 with just basic blood typing. Then we figured out how to test dried blood stains. But the real revolution? That happened in the 80s. First with PCR, which is basically a genetic photocopier for tiny bits of DNA, and then with DNA fingerprinting itself. That's what really gave us the powerhouse tool we have today.
Okay, so that brings up a huge question, right? How in the world do scientists take a sample that's so small you can't even see it and turn it into this unique, identifiable profile? It sounds like magic, but it's pure science. Let's walk through how it works.
It's really a journey with a few key steps. First up, you have the collection. This has to be done so carefully at the crime scene. Then it's off to the lab, where they extract the DNA right out of the cells. Now remember that PCR thing we mentioned? That's the amplification step. It's like a copy machine for genes, making millions of copies so there's actually enough to work with. And finally, all that genetic data gets turned into a profile, which they can then match against a suspect or run through a database like CODIS.
Okay, so DNA is definitely the star quarterback of the team, no doubt about it. But it's not the only player on the field. Forensic biology is this huge, surprisingly diverse field full of specialists who can find clues in the most unexpected places. And all those clues together, they help paint the full picture.
So, let me ask you a question that might sound a little weird. What can a single bug tell us about a crime? It sounds strange, I know, but for a forensic entomologist, an insect at a crime scene is like finding a tiny, living, ticking clock.
Yeah, you heard that right. By looking at what kind of insects are on a body, like blowflies or beetles, and what stage of life they're in, these experts can figure out the time of death with incredible accuracy. And it gets even crazier. Because certain bugs only live in certain places, they can even tell investigators if a body has been moved from one location to another. Amazing, right?
And it's not just the creepy crawlies. What about plants? Seriously, can a leaf or a seed actually help solve a murder? You bet it can. This is where forensic botany comes in. And pollen? Pollen is an absolute superstar here. See, it's specific to certain places and certain times of the year. So if investigators find pollen from a super rare flower that only grows in, say, one specific park, and that pollen is all over a suspect's jacket, well, that's a massive link to that location. It's basically nature's own GPS tracker. All right, now let's talk about one you've definitely seen in movies and TV shows. I'm talking about bite marks and dental records. Yeah, teeth play a huge, huge role in identifying both victims and criminals. These experts are called forensic odontologists, or dental detectives, which sounds way cooler. They basically have two main jobs. First, they help identify human remains by comparing them to dental records. This is absolutely critical after something like a mass disaster. And second, they analyze bite marks, whether they're on a victim or even on a piece of food left at the scene, and they can match that bite mark to a suspect's teeth.
So, okay, we've got insects, we've got plants, we've got teeth, all these amazing disciplines. But what's the day-to-day really like for these scientists? Well, let's just say it's a lot less about flashy high-tech labs and a lot more about slow, careful, methodical work.
This quote comes from an actual forensic lab manual, and it's really the philosophy that guides everything they do. No crime can be committed without leaving a clue. It's this deep belief that the evidence is always there. You just have to be careful enough to find it. The real challenge is finding it, making sure it doesn't get contaminated, and then figuring out what it all means.
And this is what that work actually looks like in reality. Every single step is done with extreme care to avoid the number one enemy, contamination. Before they even think about running a test, they're reviewing case files, planning out their every move, and sterilizing their entire work area. Everything gets documented, sketched, and photographed. It's this slow, careful dance of procedure, and it's all done to make sure the evidence is rock solid when it gets to court.
Yeah, this slow, careful reality is a million miles away from what we see on our favorite crime shows, isn't it? And that huge gap between what people think forensics is and what it actually is has a name. It's called the CSI effect. And trust me, it has some very real and sometimes very damaging consequences.
I mean, think about it. On TV, they run a DNA test and get a perfect match in, 5 minutes, right before a commercial break? In the real world, that analysis can take weeks, even months. On TV, the evidence is always perfect. In reality, it might be degraded or contaminated, or it could be a mix of DNA from 3 different people, making it almost impossible to figure out. The real lab is all about patience and dealing with uncertainty, not those instant dramatic reveals.
This gap in understanding can have some pretty devastating real-world consequences. Because the CSI effect makes the science look so fast, cheap, and easy, it can make it harder for people to understand the real systemic problems that labs face. And one of the most heartbreaking examples of this is the massive nationwide backlog of sexual assault kits just sitting in storage, waiting to be tested. Look, this isn't some simple problem with an easy fix. It's a really complex mess. Sometimes the kits aren't even sent to the lab by law enforcement. A lot of the time, the labs are just completely overwhelmed. They don't have the money or the people to keep up. So they're forced to make these impossible choices about which cases get priority. And every single kit that sits on a shelf is a silent witness that's being ignored. And for someone out there, that means justice is being delayed, or maybe even denied forever. So forensic biology has given us these absolutely mind-blowing tools to uncover the truth. The science is there. It can give a voice to the silent witnesses. But the science by itself just isn't enough. And that leaves us with a really big and really important question. We have the science to hear what the evidence is saying, but do we have the resources, the right systems in place, and maybe most importantly, the collective will to actually stop and listen?